So we're going to continue with our third speaker of the evening, who is Kara Barron. Kara is the Science and Outreach Manager at the Gila Watershed Partnership, and she has a master's degree in plant biology and conservation from Arizona State University. She's the coordinator of a volunteer-led monitoring program, so this is building on the talk we just heard, that tracks the presence of the Tamarisk leaf beetle in the Upper Gila watershed. And she's also past president of the Phoenix chapter of the AZNPS and currently the president of the Upper Gila chapter. So Kara is going to join us now and tell us about Tamarisk leaf beetles in the Upper Gila watershed.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. As Lynn said, I'm Kara Barron. I am the Science and Outreach Manager at Gila Watershed Partnership, and I'm going to tell you a little story this evening. For those of you who aren't aware, the Gila Watershed Partnership is a nonprofit group. We've been around since 1992. So our mission is to engage the community in improving the water quality and ecosystem condition of the Upper Gila watershed, and we do that through education and economic opportunity. Now, one of the big things we've been working on over the last several years is restoration along the Upper Gila River. We focus mostly on Graham and Greenlee County, and a lot of our restoration has been in Graham County, and it's due to the Tamarisk leaf beetle. So, what is the Tamarisk leaf beetle and why do we care? So let me tell you a little bit about the beetle. So for those of you who are not aware, the Tamarisk leaf beetle, Diarrhobda species, there are about, I believe there are 4 of them that are in the United States now. They feed on the chlorophyll in the leaves of the tamarisk tree. And they are active from approximately April to October, where they enter diapause during the winter months. Basically, they hibernate in the leaf litter during the winter. And the adults and larvae cause browning of tamarisk trees because they suck the chlorophyll right out of those leaves. And over time, they can kill the tree. So they were released back in 2001 as a biocontrol for tamarisk by the USDA. And part of the protocol for releasing tamarisk beetles throughout the West, and I'll talk a little bit about the tamarisk tree and why they were released as a biocontrol here in a second. They were not to be released within 200 miles, is my understanding, of SWFL habitat. And SWFL stands for the Southwest Willow Flycatcher, and I'll tell you a little bit about that little gray job in a minute. So these beetles will they can hit the same trees repeatedly throughout a season, and they are supposed to help beat back the tamarisk, but they are not expected to completely eradicate it. So tamarisk trees, many of you, again, well, actually, before I even move on, speaking of extremes, when the tamarisk leaf beetle visits an area and begins feeding on the tamarisk trees, it can be very dramatic. They can cause a stand of tamarisk trees like this to brown out basically within a week or 2. So it's very dramatic. So if you have a stand of tamarisk trees near you, you will know if the beetle has arrived. Now, I also want to say that when the USDA released the tamarisk leaf beetles, they were also, my understanding is that they were released in higher elevations like Utah, Colorado, areas like that. And they were not actually expected to come down into the lower elevations. So they weren't expected to really affect SWFL habitat. But as we all know, nature finds a way. So I'll talk about that in a minute as well. All right, so the tamarisk tree, tamarisk species, they hybridize a little bit. There's a couple different species in the Western United States, and they are a large shrub, small tree, many branched, very wisp-like branches, scale-like leaves, and they have these gorgeous sprays of flowers that are pink to purple, and they flower between August and April, or I'm sorry, I should say April and August. They were introduced, so from Eurasia, they were introduced in the 1820s for erosion control along riparian watercourses, and also for aesthetics. They're beautiful. They have become widespread across the world. They're on almost every continent, and they are a problem in many areas of the Western United States. And the reason that they are a concern is because they can create very dense monocultures of trees. And plant for plant, so if you were to compare a tamarisk tree to a cottonwood that also grows along riparian galleries or riparian waterways, tree for tree, they take up probably about the same amount of water. But because the tamarisk trees create these dense monocultures, these dense forests, basically, they end up using a lot of water, and they can change the hydrological patterns of the waterways. They can channelize rivers, and they can also increase soil surface salinity, which ends up displacing other plants. They outcompete other plants because one tree can produce 500,000 seeds in a year. And they also can alter the fire regime once they take over an area. These plants will not be beaten back by fire. They will come back, they will resprout. And so, and they burn hot. And so it just reinforces that monoculture, and they can be very difficult to eradicate. It becomes very costly. And so, we planted these things in many areas, and now there are many land managers across the West that want them gone, and it's very difficult and costly. But the Southwest Willow Flycatcher is one of those animals that has adapted to live in the tamarisk tree. So they will nest in the tamarisk trees. So this little guy here is very nondescript, small. The people do monitoring of the Southwest Willow Flycatcher. They typically listen for it rather than look for it because they're hard to see. And it is a insectivorous bird, hence flycatcher. And it typically, historically, would nest in willows. But the tamarisk trees have taken over much of the willow habitat in many areas. And so these flycatchers have adapted to nesting in the tamarisk trees. Now they live in the southwestern United States and northern Mexico for when they're breeding, which is in the spring and summer months. And then they head back to southern Mexico, Central America, and South America for the winter. They need dense vegetation and water nearby in order to breed successfully. And much of this information, so as Lynn said, I am more of a plant nerd, not so much of a bird nerd, although I respect bird nerds. So, and more information, if you would like to have it, you can get it at the National Park Service website here. All right, so why does Swiffle need protection from the tamarisk leaf beetle? Well, when the Southwest Willow Flycatcher is nesting, it's about the same time that the tamarisk leaf beetle becomes active. Now, as I mentioned earlier, when the tamarisk leaf beetle was first released, the USDA didn't think, researchers, I should say, didn't think that they would travel very far. It would take many decades, maybe even they would never get down to the lower elevations in the Southwest Willow Flycatcher habitat. But that is not the case. It turns out that the tamarisk leaf beetle spreads up to 30 miles in a season. And the breeding season for the Southwest Willow Flycatcher overlaps with beetle activity. So when the beetles are active, they thin the vegetation density, and that increases temperatures. And basically what can happen if the Southwest Willow Flycatcher is nesting at the time when the beetle hits, it will cook the eggs. So this can be a big problem for an endangered species. So by 2013, everybody that was involved realized that the Tamarisk leaf beetle was adapting. It was going to be heading for some of that critical habitat for Southwest Willow Flycatcher. The willow flycatchers tend to go to the same breeding grounds each year. So the Walton Family Foundation funded Gila Watershed Partnership, as well as a few other watershed partnerships, to remove islands of tamarisk, basically, and then plant habitat that was more suitable to the willow flycatcher. And we focused on the upper Gila River. And this is to prepare for the arrival of the beetle. So hopefully when the beetle comes through, the willow flycatcher would have some refuge to go to and hopefully be able to still successfully breed. So to date, we have removed over 200 acres of tamarisk trees, and we have replanted and maintained 135 acres of vegetation. And we, for many years, we're doing this work. We actually, the Walton grant just sunsetted last year, so now we're in maintenance mode. We are still doing some plantings, but mostly we're maintaining. And for up until last year, people give us a lot of guff. Oh, you did so much work and that was so costly, and the beetle's never going to get here. For a long time, the closest it had gotten was Lordsburg, and so everybody joked that it was stuck at a truck stop in Lordsburg. And and then even after a couple of years of it being there, it disappeared from there. But lo and behold, in 2020, I believe it was June, Melanie Luchek, our outgoing executive director, happened to be in the Clifton-Morenci area. And as she was driving over the bridge, under that bridge is the San Francisco River, and that is a major tributary to the upper Gila. And she noticed that all the tamarisk trees looked dead. And so her and I went up there and investigated a couple of days later, and sure enough, the larvae and the adult beetles were everywhere. So it was really exciting to see. And by the end of 2020, they had reached the Gila River, gotten into the Gila Box, National Riparian Conservation Area, and that's where they stopped in 2020. So here, I want to show you this map here. So in 2020, this is a map from River's Edge West. And this is the data from 2020. And as you can see, where it's circled there is approximately where the upper Gila watershed is. And those blue dots were first sightings for 2020. And you can see that we finally got into our watershed, and we did some monitoring in our own restoration sites, and we didn't see them. So that's what those white dots are. It's places where the beetle was monitored for presence and it was not found. Just to give you some, a little bit of insight into where we're working. So our restoration sites, that 200 acres I was telling you about, in the upper corner here, that red triangle is where we're working, and you can see the border of Arizona and New Mexico there. So upon closer inspection here, we have several sites with names that I'm sure don't mean anything to you, but these are, so R18 is near Pima in Graham County, a little town of Pima, and R8 is between Fort Thomas and Beetles, and Beetles is on the San Carlos Apache Reservation. And so that's about 30 miles, let's see, maybe a little less than that, spread out here. So 2021, I am now working to get a monitoring program together, because River's Edge West, who is the premier place to go for all things tamarisk and tamarisk leaf beetle, they do data collection throughout the West. They they're kind of a clearinghouse for information, and they develop the protocols for monitoring the Tamarisk leaf beetle. So we use their protocols, and we have, I'm in the process of setting up long-term monitoring places. And so all of these pins that you see are places that we are recruiting volunteers to monitor. And it's a really easy protocol to learn. I have students from Eastern Arizona College helping us, classes from Eastern Arizona College helping us, and then also a class from Wilcox High School is helping us. By the end of by the end of the season, actually, as of last week, we were not only seeing them at our restoration sites out in Fort Thomas, but we were also seeing them in Duncan here. And last week, actually it was Friday, I got an email from the students in Wilcox, and they found 2 Tamarisk leaf beetles down here in the San Simon. And the San Simon River, it goes all the way down into the Bowie area, so just near the I-10. And so basically last year, the leaf beetle was Morenci Clifton area and came down into the Gila box. And this year it's gone 30 miles in every direction, upriver, downriver, and then upriver through the San Simon. So it's really exciting to see. Now, my understanding is that there's still a lot to learn about the habits and phenology of the Tamarisk leaf beetle. I was really surprised to know that they were still active in November. They should be in diapause. Of course, it's still been in the 80s, so that might have something to do with it. Ben Bloodworth from River's Edge West has said that the Tamarisk leaf beetle might hit one year, couple years in a row, and then they might not be in an area at all the next year. So it's very hit and miss if they're going to be in an area. So we're really excited to be able to provide data for River's Edge West and for the researchers doing this work. And, you know, I wish that I had answers for you about, you know, how Swiffle is doing and what the beetle is doing. But at this point, we're still kind of waiting with bated breath to see what happens. So we're really kind of excited to see it. It is very extreme, I think, how they just, one year they're not there, the next year they're 30 miles in every direction. And we're really excited to see what happens. So if you'd like to know more about the Tamarisk leaf beetle and Tamarisk in general, control issues, things like that, I would highly recommend visiting the River's Edge West website. And I am also happy to answer questions as best as I can. And with that, I will say thank you. And here's a little picture of Datura wrightii that we see a lot in our restoration sites.
Great. Thank you so much, Kara. So I encourage the participants in the meeting to type questions in the chat. We have one. What is the % mortality of replacement trees in your restoration area? So I guess this means the willows that you replace the tamarisks. How well are they doing?
Yeah, it depends, but we've recently seen, like, it depends on the species, and we've been trying different methods, you know, basins, irrigation, things like that. But we've noticed that basins seem to be working the best for some things, and we have, I would say, on average, because we are doing irrigation and maintaining things, anywhere from like 50 to 80% for some things. Some things are lower, but I would say 50% would be good. But for some things, it's much higher than that.
Okay. Another question. The Fish and Wildlife people at Bosque del Apache have been managing Tamarisk beetle and the willow flycatcher for over 11 years. Are you in contact with them? Have you been using any of their protocols?
No, not yet. But I imagine that now that we are in this boat, we probably will be, or at least we'll be coordinating. The land that we're doing restoration on is technically private land. It's owned by Freeport-McMoRan, but they are always eager to look good in the community and do the right thing whenever they can, considering their business. They've been really good partners, actually. I have to give them a lot of credit. So we'll have to see. I think that would be a good idea, but I'm not sure. Our restoration manager will probably be handling that.
Okay, here's another question. Do the Southwest Willow Flycatchers eat the Tamarisk beetles?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. So that might you want to put on your list of things to explore. And another question, do the beetles feed on, now this is about the beetle feeding. Does the beetle feed on the larger tree species, Tamarisk aphylla?
My understanding is that they do not. Not typically. They seem to be the chinensis and the ramosissima, which I believe might be one and the same, depending on. I'm not sure what the taxonomy is specifically now. I think they hybridize, but the aphylla seems to be left alone for the which is my understanding. Yeah.
And just another comment from a person watching, Grand Canyon National Park has also introduced and monitored them for many years as well.
Great.
So it looked like from your map that you showed that there's a lot of presence of the beetle throughout the Rio Grande. I think the Rio Grande River in New Mexico is, I think, the river that was demonstrated there. And so there are lots of other places from which you could be getting sort of input. Another question, are there Southwest flycatchers currently nesting in your restoration areas?
They, well, not at this moment because they have all gone south, but we do have known nesting sites. They are monitored every year. And I believe that money comes from APHIS and or Fish and Wildlife Service. Yeah.
Okay. A comment from a participant, just a comment. We have a ranch on the Dolores River in Paradox Valley, Colorado. The release of the beetle has been of tremendous benefit in restoring the river ecology. The loss of tamarisk and the results in the return of the coyote willow and also restored habitats for elk and cattle.
Wonderful.
But another question for you is, what is the primary objective of your particular project? Are you trying to get rid of the beetle? Or are you trying to get rid of the tamarisk? Or are you trying to protect the flycatcher? I mean, so you know, there are lots of components in your project. What do you see as the ideal outcome if your project would be what you would call successful?
Yeah, so as a watershed group, we got that large grant to do that work, and we are trying to maintain habitat for the willow flycatcher, but it will depend on funding. And we work with partners like Rivers Edge West. The Waltons have a Forever Our Rivers Foundation to help with monitoring, and Fish and Wildlife Service. So we'll probably be working with partners. We may not ourselves work directly, but I know that we won't be dropping the ball either. We will work to make sure that things.
Sure,
yeah.
That wasn't really what I think the question was about, but they were just trying to sort of sort out.
Yeah. No, that is a good question, because honestly, we don't have an opinion on the beetle. We know it is what it is, right? Our community, we live in a big mining, ranching, farming community. And so everybody we don't always agree on everything, but we all agree that we hate tamarisk. So Tamarisk, getting rid of it is very costly. So will we continue to get rid of it? I mean, it will, we probably will. We'll be doing targeted projects that we know can be maintained, because we have some really dense stands of tamarisk. And so trying to eradicate it ourselves is just impossible. So we are a bit excited about the beetles' arrival, but we will, be working with partners to make sure that the swiffle is protected as best we can.
Yeah, great. I'm sure that what you're really seeking is a restored watershed that works well for everyone.
Exactly.
Users and other elements of the natural ecosystem. So I'm sure that's your long-term goal.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your presentation. This is something that I think probably a lot of us had never heard anything about. And so it's really good to have it on our radar as a topic to pay attention to. Thanks again, Carol.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.